I was on Family Feud, laughing with Steve Harvey, when one question ripped open a 15-year-old wound and forced me to expose my abuser to the world, live on national television. The studio lights were hotter than I ever imagined, not just warm, but a physical weight, pressing down on my skin, baking the cheap, glittery makeup onto my face. The noise was a living thing, a constant roar of applause, music, and a general excited hum that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. And right in the middle of it all, bathed in a spotlight that made his teeth seem impossibly white, was Steve Harvey. It was surreal. My whole life, my family had gathered around the TV to watch Family Feud. It was our thing. My dad, Dave, would shout answers at the screen. My mom, Susan, would quietly guess the number one answer almost every time. And my brother, Mark, would just make fun of everyone's bad guesses. To actually be here, standing on this iconic set with my family, wearing our custom-made, slightly too tight matching blue t-shirts that read, "The Miller Maulers," felt like stepping into a dream. Dad was practically vibrating next to me, a grin plastered on his face so wide it looked painful. He'd been practicing his handshake with Steve in the mirror for a week. We'd won the first 2 rounds, mostly thanks to my mom's uncanny ability to tap into the hive mind of the 100 people surveyed. We were on a roll. The energy was electric. We were laughing, high-fiving, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. The other family, the Parkers, were lovely people, but we were mopping the floor with them, and the competitive thrill was intoxicating. Steve Harvey was everything you'd hope he'd be. Charming, quick-witted, and his laugh was so infectious it echoed through the entire studio. He'd just made a joke about my dad's terrible answer in the last round. "Name something you might find in a junk drawer." Dad's answer, "Hope." And the audience was still tittering. "All right, Miller family," Steve boomed, his voice like smooth gravel. "Y'all are 200 points away from playing for $20,000. You feeling good?" We all cheered, a chaotic mess of whoops and hollers. "Let's send up the next 2. Sarah, get on up here." My heart did a little backflip. This was my turn, my moment. My dad gave my shoulder a squeeze. "You got this, sweetie. Just breathe." I nodded, trying to calm the butterflies doing acrobatics in my stomach, and walked towards the podium. The opposing player, a kind-faced woman named Brenda, met me there, and we shook hands. The lights seemed to get even brighter, and I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me. I gripped the sides of the podium, my knuckles white. Steve leaned into his microphone. "All right, ladies." Top 6 answers on the board. He looked down at his card, a twinkle in his eye. "Here we go." We surveyed 100 people, and the question is this: name something a person tries to keep hidden from their family. My breath hitched in my throat. Of all the questions, it was just a stupid coincidence, a random roll of the dice, but it felt like a targeted strike. My mind, which had been buzzing with potential answers just a second ago, went completely blank. Brenda hit her buzzer first, a loud, jarring BZZT that snapped me back to the present. "A secret lover," she said confidently. Steve's face lit up. "Show me a secret lover." The board dinged. It was the number 2 answer. My family groaned in unison behind me. The Parkers cheered. It was my turn to steal. I had to come up with something, anything. I could feel Steve's gaze on me, patient but expectant. "Come on now, Sarah," he prompted gently. "Something you hide from your family." My eyes instinctively scanned the audience, a sea of shadowy faces beyond the blinding lights. It was a nervous habit, looking for a friendly face, a reassuring smile. My gaze swept across the rows, past the cheering sections for both families, to the general seating area further back. And then I saw him. It was like the world suddenly switched to slow motion. The roar of the crowd faded into a dull, distant hum. The hot lights felt ice cold. He was sitting in the third row of the middle section, slightly slouched in his seat. Older, a little heavier, but unmistakably him. The same cruel curl to his lip, the same dark eyes that used to watch my every move. He wasn't looking at me, but at the stage, a lazy, arrogant smirk on his face as if he owned the place. Next to him was a woman I didn't recognize, and on her lap sat a little girl, no older than 5, with bright blonde pigtails. My blood turned to ice in my veins. My hands started to tremble, and the microphone in front of me seemed to grow to an impossible size. I couldn't breathe. It was him. After all these years, after everything I'd done to escape, he was right there. "Sarah?" Steve's voice cut through the fog, sounding concerned now. The game show cheer had vanished from his tone. "You okay? You got an answer for me?" I tried to speak, to force a word out, but my throat had closed up. All I could see was his face, that smirk. The whole happy, perfect dream of being here, of winning with my family, shattered into a million pieces. My joy curdled into pure, cold terror. The game, the money, the cameras, none of it mattered anymore. There was a monster in the room. My family was looking at me, their smiles fading into worried frowns. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I could feel a panic attack clawing its way up my chest. Steve took a step closer, his comedic persona completely gone, replaced by a look of genuine alarm. "Hey, talk to me now. What's wrong?" I finally found my voice, but it wasn't my own. It was a raw, trembling whisper, amplified by the microphone for the whole world to hear. "Steve, I can't answer." I shook my head, my eyes locked on the man in the audience. "I can't play. My abuser is in this audience." The silence that fell over the studio was heavier and more absolute than the preceding roar of applause. It was a physical void, sucking all the air and warmth out of the room. Every single person, from Steve Harvey on the stage to the cameraman on the boom to the furthest person in the back row, was frozen. For a heartbeat, there was only the low hum of the electronic equipment. Then, a collective, audible gasp rippled through the audience. I saw my father take a half-step forward, his goofy grin having melted into a mask of utter confusion. My mom's hand was at her throat, her eyes wide with bewilderment. Mark just stared, his mouth slightly agape. They had no idea. I had buried this secret so deep, encased it in concrete, and dropped it to the bottom of my soul, and now I had just detonated it on national television. Steve Harvey didn't miss a beat. He held up a hand to the control booth, a clear, authoritative gesture. "Cut the music. Stop the game. We're gonna stop the game right now." His voice was low, serious, and devoid of any showmanship. He turned his full attention to me, his expression one of profound concern. He took another step closer, creating a small protective circle around me and the podium. "Sarah," he said, his voice now gentle enough that only I and the microphone could hear it. "You look at me. Don't look out there. You look right here at me. Are you serious?" I could only manage a single jerky nod, my eyes still glued to the man in the audience. He was starting to shift uncomfortably now, the lazy smirk replaced by a flicker of something else, annoyance, maybe even fear. He whispered something to the woman beside him, who was now staring at me with a bewildered, accusatory glare. My dad was at my side in an instant, his big, warm hand on my back. "Sarah, what's going on?" "What did you say?" Behind him, my mom was starting to cry, silent tears tracking through her foundation. This was my fault. This perfect day, this one bright spot in years of gray, was now turning into a nightmare of my own making. But seeing him there, so smug, so close to me, so insulated in his new life with his new family, lit a fuse in me that had been dormant for 15 years. Something inside me snapped. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but for the first time, it was accompanied by a white-hot spear of rage. He didn't get to sit there and watch my family's happiness like it was a show for his entertainment. Not anymore. Steve leaned into his earpiece, listening intently to a voice I couldn't hear. He nodded, his face a grim mask. "All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. House lights up, please." The brilliant, focused stage lights dimmed and the general overhead lighting of the studio came on, washing the scene in a flat, unforgiving glare. It was no longer a magical television set. It was just a big, cold room full of shocked strangers. The spell was broken. Now the murmuring started, a low, buzzing cacophony of whispers and speculation. I saw people pointing, not just at me, but at the man in the third row. 2 uniformed security guards were already making their way down the aisle towards him, calm but purposeful. "Who, Sarah?" My dad's voice was a desperate rasp right next to my ear. "Who is it?" I couldn't look at him. If I looked into my father's kind, trusting eyes and said the name, I knew his world would crumble just as mine had. Instead, I pointed, my hand shaking so badly it was a blur. "There," I choked out. "Third row." The man in the gray jacket. My family all turned to look, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. I saw my brother Mark squint, his brow furrowed. And then I saw the moment of recognition on my mother's face. It was a subtle shift, a slight widening of her eyes, a sharp intake of breath. She knew. Down in the audience, the scene was devolving into chaos. Robert, Uncle Robert, was on his feet now, his face purple with rage. He was trying to project an air of indignant innocence, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "She's lying." "She's always been a drama queen. Just ask anyone." The woman, Lisa, was pulling at his arm, her face pale with shock. The little girl in her lap starting to cry. The security guards reached his row, speaking to him in low, firm tones. "Sir, we need you to come with us." "I'm not going anywhere," he yelled, trying to shake them off. "This is slander. My brother is right up there. Dave, tell them she's making it all up." And that's when it clicked for my dad. I saw his whole body go rigid. His gaze shot from Robert to me, then back to Robert. The name, the face, the accusation, the pieces slammed together in his mind with the force of a car crash. His face, which a moment ago had been a picture of loving concern, contorted into a snarl of pure animalistic fury I had never seen before. He roared, the name tearing from his throat like a raw wound. It wasn't a question, it was an indictment. Before anyone could react, my dad lunged forward, trying to get off the stage. "You!" he screamed, his voice breaking with a decade and a half of betrayed trust. Mark and Steve Harvey both grabbed him, holding him back as he struggled against them, his eyes locked on his brother. "I'm going to kill you!" My mom let out a sob, a ragged, heartbroken sound that was worse than any scream. She stumbled backwards, and my brother had to let go of my dad to catch her, as her knees buckled. The whole place was in an uproar now. People were shouting. The Parker family was huddled together looking terrified, and producers were swarming the stage. Through it all, I could hear Robert's voice, still trying to control the narrative as security finally began to physically escort him out. "She's poisoning you against me, Dave." "It's what she does. She ruins everything." His words were like acid, burning through the noise. He was almost at the exit, a pathetic, struggling figure, but he turned his head and locked eyes with me one last time. There was no remorse, no fear, only pure, venomous hatred. "You should have kept your mouth shut, you little bitch," he mouthed silently, a cruel smirk finally returning to his lips just before the doors swung shut behind him. The doors slammed shut, but his venomous words hung in the air, a toxic cloud that settled over the stage. For a moment, the chaos continued to swirl around me. My dad's guttural shouts, my mom's weeping, the frantic chatter of producers in headsets. Then, a firm but gentle hand was on my arm. I flinched, but it was Steve Harvey. His face was etched with a seriousness I never thought I'd see on the man whose job was to laugh. "Come with me," he said, his voice a low rumble. "All of you. Let's get you out of here." He led us off the stage, shielding us from the gawking eyes of the audience as producers formed a human wall. We were ushered into a small, sterile green room backstage. The second the door closed, the muffled noise of the studio vanished, and we were left in a stark, echoing silence. My dad finally let go of the rage and just crumpled. He collapsed onto a cheap sofa, burying his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. My mom, still being supported by Mark, slid down to sit on the floor, her makeup a mess of tear-streaked raccoon eyes. Mark just stood there, his face ashen, looking from one broken family member to the next, lost. The silence was finally broken by my dad. He looked up at me, his eyes red and raw, with a pain so deep it seemed to age him a decade in 10 minutes. 15 years, he whispered, his voice cracking. He was at your high school graduation. He was at our anniversary party last year. He held Mark's baby." The words were like stones, dropping into the quiet room. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me? I would have killed him with my bare hands. I would have protected you, and there it was, the question I had dreaded my entire life." "Because of this, Dad!" I cried, the words I'd rehearsed in my head 1,000 times finally spilling out. "Because I knew you'd want to kill him. Because he was your brother. He told me if I ever said a word he would destroy our family. He'd tell you I was a liar, that I came on to him. He'd make you choose. And I didn't want to be the reason our family fell apart. I didn't want to be this." I gestured around the room at the wreckage of our dream day. My dad just shook his head, looking utterly defeated. But then my mother spoke, her voice thin and reedy, almost unrecognizable. "I knew," she whispered to the floor. "I think I always knew." My dad's head snapped up. Mark and I both stared at her. "What?" Mark breathed. She finally looked up, her eyes finding mine, and in them I saw 15 years of her own silent prison. "I never saw anything," she said quickly, as if to defend herself. "Not really. But there were things, times when he'd look at you that made my skin crawl. Once, at a Christmas party, I saw him touch your back as you walked by. It was too low. It lasted too long. I told myself I was crazy. I confronted him the next day, and he laughed at me. He said I was jealous and hysterical. He made me feel so small, so stupid, so I buried it. I chose to believe the lie because the truth was, it was just too horrible to even consider. She crawled over to me and took my hands. Her own were freezing cold. "Oh, my baby," she sobbed, pulling me into a hug that felt like an apology for a lifetime of silence. "I am so, so sorry. I should have been stronger. I should have protected you." I hugged her back, tears I didn't know I had left finally falling. We weren't broken because of my secret. We had been broken by it all along, quietly splintering from the inside out. This horrible public detonation was the only thing that could have finally brought the truth to the surface. My dad got up and knelt in front of us, wrapping his big arms around both of us. Mark came over and put his hands on our shoulders. The four of us, the Miller Maulers, were huddled together, not as game show contestants, but as survivors. A little while later, there was a soft knock on the door. A kind-faced producer came in with Steve Harvey behind her. She explained that Robert had been handed over to the police, who were waiting to take my statement when I was ready. She said the network would provide counseling for our entire family, for as long as we needed it. "And the game?" my dad asked, his voice thick. Steve stepped forward. "The game's over," he said softly. "But you folks won." The Parker family agreed. There was no other way for this to end. "The $20,000 is yours." He looked me right in the eye. "What you did up there, Sarah, that took more guts than anything I've ever seen. You're the strongest person in this room. We never did finish the game. We walked out of that studio, not into the bright lights and cheering crowds we'd imagined, but out a back exit into the quiet twilight. The ride home was silent, but it wasn't the strained silence of unspoken secrets anymore. It was the quiet of a storm that had finally passed. As we drove, my dad reached back from the passenger seat and took my hand. He didn't say anything, but he held on tight for the entire ride. We lost the chance to be on television. We lost a brother and an uncle. We lost the happy, uncomplicated family I always pretended we were. But as I looked at my parents in the front seat and my brother beside me, all of us battered and bruised, but finally in the light, I realized what we'd won. We didn't win $20,000. We won something priceless. We won each other back. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt free.